Yeah, so what I'm looking for, persona. Yeah, the persona, that's good. It's the persona that people, are trying to portray on the virtual world. So just a short little introductory activity about that. Did anybody have one that they want to share? Like, what would be something that you could possibly write about yourself online that's obviously not quite true?
Who's the cold hero?
I was a cult leader.
I can't believe it.
I'm down the cold leader too.
Yeah, not very good. All right, move on then. I've got the slide there. Yep. So the next thing was pretty much reviewing the three articles. The first article that was on there on the readings was just the one that was done by Henderson et al. And it sort of just looked broadly at how students think, and university students in particular think, when they're using an online virtual world. And overall, I don't know if other people read it in a little bit more detail than I did, but what I got out of it was the fact that they really sort of found promising things to suggest that students do think the same way they would if they were inside the classroom, but that there was much more research that needed to be done. So it's sort of like the first, or one of the first bits of research to cover it. They didn't really draw on too much prior research. So it found that there was a high disparity between people who had high amounts of thoughts and also didn't really think a whole lot when they were in the virtual world and taking the task, which from memory I think was learning how to order food in Mandarin for a Chinese as a second language learning class. So yeah, the study sort of needed to be, was that right in saying that it needed to be more research done to sort of complete what their initial findings were?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a positive sort of look into the thoughts among students were pretty similar to being in the virtual world as they are to being in the real world for a concept like learning how to order Chinese food in Mandarin. Based off that, the next thing I'm going to get us to have a go at, and probably take about 20 minutes, so it's not too time consuming, is on the Ning, I've set up in the discussion part just a quick little learning activity. The reason I've done it is because I'm not going to give you any help how to try and do it. It's an example of a question that the Year 10s, for an example, would work through. So it's an example of a question that I'd go through on the board with the Year 10s and then have them do it and obviously go around and see them one-on-one. And I just want to see how you reckon, how your thought or internally sort of think, how you guys are thinking about the problem when just receiving no help other than what's put on the what the information is that I've put on the task to do. So I've got it all there. I've put a link website to the calculator if you don't have a calculator on your phone. Pretty much the problem requires you to find out how many grams of carbohydrates, protein, and fats a particular student or a particular athlete needs to fulfill his energy requirements for a basketball tournament. So there's a little bit of math to draw upon, but I'm see sort of if it's pretty difficult to really do it on the virtual world. So how we go with that? Should be just on the discussion page. The math is
The reading is on the side of the reading.
Yes.
So we got a reading.
Just going to share this with you guys. Sorry, I think I turned it off just before.
Yeah, about 10 or 11 posts now, yep. So it's, if you're on the home page, it's called Virtual World Learning, do we have a tutorial? afterwards, we'll have a bit of a discussion about it if you found it a little bit harder than getting instruction from the learning environment or real world environment.
How many kilojoules?
Oh, I was saying, sorry, you're helping somebody else, you have to do it to the live chat. Sorry, yeah, you have to ask me to answer the live chat to help. Sorry. And if you want to ask a question about it, you need to do it through the live help.
So they have to go to the Ning
Yeah.
to respond.
Yeah, to respond, and then also ask for help. It's not meant to be a real world learning environment.
So people online could, if they're listening, they could try and do the same online. So if they could read this, which I'm having trouble on my screen updating it, but hopefully you can read the activity. But you have to do your response on the Ning.
Or you can just post your answer on the live chat.
Oh, they could post on the live chat? Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, if you could post on the live chat, we can be able to see it, which would be quite nice.
Yeah. And then to just say whether there's a question at the end there on the PowerPoint. Does learning and applying learning in the virtual world easier for you than in the real world? And then just a little bit of a what's that called? When you've got strongly agree, not sure, disagree, strongly disagree. Something that's got a name.
Like
Like scale, yeah.
Yeah, so 5 would be strongly disagree, 1 is strongly agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when people post something and I've got the Ning running at the back, it comes through actually. So Kate's actually out there doing this from the hangar. Chat's down. Oh, yeah, I'll put it back up. Sorry.
That's on the.
Is it on the Ning?
Yeah. Yeah, if you get different answers, someone will try and discuss how and where you've gone wrong in the live chat.
It's the same with me. It's right at the bottom. So scroll right to the bottom of your page, and for some reason it's not defaulting to to pull it up onto the screen. Maybe go to the week 9. I think that's what happens with me too. On the home page, it drops to the bottom of the page, so you can see the most recent updates, and the live chat doesn't come up in the window.
Why is 15% zero? Alright, probably about time to move on based off the discussion. So I think I lost it. I think everyone started to get the right answer, or did have the right answer. How did, by the way, I thought it takes about 25-30 minutes or half a lesson to teach the attendance, so
I've just put it up if you want to walk it through.
oh yeah, that's all right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, cool. So, do people find that, I know there's not a lot of teaching construction, do people find that harder than they would if they have to do that in the real world? About the same, a bit easier, general consensus. About the same? Oh. Sure. Yeah, okay, that's a very good point. So, yeah, absolutely. I suppose that probably comes back to how I know myself whenever it's time to do a little bit of research and work on a computer online. The good kids fly, and the kids that are looking for a distraction, just generally to get out of work, it seems, are the ones that can't apply themselves to that type of environment. So yeah, it's probably like that. You're one of the guys that wants to get on with the work. Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Really, was the point of that think that sometimes they can't quite quickly solve.
Or just to sort of see it overall, if your thought patterns sort of change when we sort of see it online, as opposed to if you're just being told in the real world and do something, and feel, some people find that easier to do something in the real world, like hands-on methods, maybe that could be wrong, hands-on methods probably be better than the real world, maybe visual methods are better. Online virtual world. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, well, before I move on, anybody, there's probably everyone's more of an expert than me when it comes to this type of thing, but they're easy to set up. Like these sort of aviators, how yeah. But I know in the third study that we'll look at shortly, it was pretty much the software they used was a gaming software, I think, that come from the that was funded by the NT government, Northern Territory.
Yeah.
Funded it, so it must have been to do with long distance education. So they used that in their study, which I, from memory, took place in New Zealand to sort of see if higher order thinking skills could be examined by using second life worlds. Yeah. We'll move on. So the second article, sort of a little bit different to the first. So it was reviewed a lot of prior research and found that the best uses of virtual worlds included were the fact that they were communication spaces and they simulated space and experimental spaces. I'm not sure I might have written that down wrong. Concluded that students like using virtual worlds because they enjoy the ability to be able to move around freely in a 3D space, to meet new people and experience virtual field trips simulated by experiences. So that was sort of a really broad look into what research has said about virtual worlds and sort of come to its own conclusion that they are effective in student learning. I suppose I probably asked a lot of questions of you because it's probably not my strongest area when it comes to ICT, but does anybody use this? Like, feed on rounds or teaching? Has anybody uses this firsthand or seen it firsthand and been able to see whether or not students do enjoy sort of the free ability? Because I know myself, I've worked in two schools which would come down sort of the low socioeconomic area, and I know that for myself, a lot of the students who I've taught, I don't think would really respond to this too well. I just think they get lost in that sort of overall freedom that this gives you and sort of become easily distracted. Has anybody seen it work well?
I know one of the contents and kind of tries to implement schools across all scales to do. That's been dated. It's really fun. So that's really good. It's easier to look at but they really want to fly around the world. So they'll just get on and because the landscape will be there, but yeah, basically use it to move. But they do like that, you know, and move. And that's the only one I use. I mean,
I think I have done a lot of myself, I really don't mind that. And so I teach that use it in the classroom, they also then And it's a bit of a different kind of virtual world. You don't have to create an avatar, you just or whatever. There's different things, but it's they love it. And this is great things they can do because you can create a world that are in context of the lesson that you want to do. Kids, I think they've already embraced it in their house.
I've actually used it a bit in media. So we did what's called machinima, where you record the gameplay of the video game, and then you sort of make a story or a script out of it, and then you can record voice or subtitles or whatever. I did that with there was always a different group of students because it was where I was working at the Australian Centre for Moving Village, just down in Beck Square. It was like they coming on excursions. So the fact that they were able to pick it up and just go, we did Halo, which is that's fairly advanced gaming. In terms of creating an avatar, we really do different armor. But they it was something that they did a lot of. And even now, at one parent sort of use Minecraft as sort of a gateway to, I guess, education for the gaming. And it definitely has benefits for teamwork, collaboration, problem solving.
Well, they're definitely 21st century skills. I know that I heard the other subject that I'm doing at the moment, that I think it's Microsoft and other big companies are actually funded research to see how we can get students better, have those type of teamwork and collaborative skills, because a lot of employers that they take on just lack those skills. So even though they've got the degree, when it comes to working in an environment, they just can't work with other people. So I think that's a really important element of it. Definitely one thing I took away from the other subjects.
Can I just ask about Mishima? So it's not, you didn't create the space in Second Life, it was, you created it as a separate space, is that right? And created like a Halo game?
We used Halo plugged in video recorder.
Yep.
And we then pretty much recorded the footage of the game, so they sort of have a plan around what they wanted to do in that game, whether it was someone go to someone else's house in the car and says, hey, what's up, let's go party, whatever.
Yep.
They would then sort of act it out on the game.
Yep.
And then that footage would then be put into like a editing software like Final Cut Pro or you know, even iMovie. And then they would cut it, edit it, and swap around different camera angles.
Yep.
So the trick is you have to have, depending on how many characters you want in your machinima, you have to have one extra, which is the camera.
Yep.
And that person's view is like
Is captured.
is captured.
Yep.
So that person will give a video camera and they take a turn sort of do different camera angles. They do like over the shoulder shot and wide and all this kind of stuff, and then they cut it together to make a story. Most of the time they put subtitles because they didn't like to record their voice, but they also want to record.
Yep. Because there is a Australian Film and Television School, Mishima, in Second Life. Yeah, I think.
I know that the people that did, where we got the idea was from a studio called Rooster Teeth, and they did Red vs. Blue, this like massive online series of this Halo, like Team Red versus Team Blue.
Blue, yeah.
And they'd always like fight and have jokes and stuff. And it was fantastic, and that's what we did.
So, Kalatini, have you used Second Life for teaching?
No, I haven't, but I'm very happy.
Right. But you use games a bit, like you're fairly...
Yeah, I've played like a lot of like more strategies. They're different, like there's very extra nuance.
But there's a fair bit of cooperation, isn't there, in those fantasy...
Well, you can choose if you want to solo play and you wish to play solo, you can group up with friends and you can join like a big group to like
Okay. I just quickly, if I can, if you don't mind, I just want to quickly, I love that photograph that you've chosen. And I did want us to go to Avaya, which is very much like Second Life, but I just couldn't get it to work. The University of Melbourne did have a server, and it currently doesn't have that server operating, which means that I couldn't even get into the test server at the Avaya site, so it's not actually, it's not going to work tonight, but we hopefully it might work at some point. We'll be able to go in and have a look. What the university, Melbourne University, tried to do was set up a 3D virtual environment for teaching, and this was in the articles. There were quite a few, I'm not saying it's still current, quite a few of these teaching spaces that around the world that they mentioned 300 universities were involved in Second Life. Not this is Avaya is not Second Life, but it's very similar. And if you went to any of these spaces, and I'm not saying that I'm the only one that's done this, but if you went to any of these university spaces, some were very good. Like the MIT one was fantastic, but it was for architecture students. So the space was, you know, walkthroughs of designs, so that made sense. And the Australian Film and Television School one was Mishima, like you could make a movie by, you know, adopting a role as a character, and then there must have been a camera. I don't know how that worked out, but somehow you could go in as a team, and you'd have actors who would dress up, and they would play out the movie. And I tried to use some of the educational spaces, which was like Avaya. And the only thing I wanted to talk about really is the fact that the way that the universities, or many universities, tried to set up their spaces was not like MIT or like Australian Film and Television School. They set them up like universities. So you walked to lecture theatres and you listened to a person lecturing who was at a podium, and they had a slide set behind them, and you watched the slide set as you listened. If when they introduced the voice, you could actually hear them speak. Often you could actually go to these spaces and download the slide set later, even if they weren't there. Generally, this was there was an attempt in even our Avaya to set up timetables like universities and have real-time space, which was completely unnatural. It felt really weird because you would be an avatar, and you would go and sit down on a chair, and you could listen to the lecture at the time that lecture was given, or if you happened to be late, you could download the slides and listen to the soundtrack, which was often recorded at the same time, which seemed more logical to me. There was no reason for sitting in the chair, as far as I could work out, because you didn't have to hear the thing. You could walk around and still hear it. And our Avaya space, that's all I was really going to demonstrate to you, is that it feels familiar because we're used to university spaces like these spaces, and we know that when you're listening to me speak or Robert speak, that you just listen and don't interrupt. But when you actually try it yourself, it's really hard not to move around. But the space is so inviting, and especially Second Life, but Avaya has got a similar thing. Second Life, if you want to go somewhere, it's pretty easy to fly. Like, it's probably easier to fly than to walk. So within about, you know, whenever I went in there, if I just extend this a bit further than I intended to, but whenever I went into Second Life with my students, I would try and get them to learn how to walk and turn and converse and stay in contact so that we could hear each other or text each other. So when you're in the near proximity to someone, you can hear them, and your texting can actually, it comes up and you can ask people questions and they respond either in text or voice. Sometimes if you get too many voices, it crashes, and that's no good, so you don't necessarily always want to use voice, you just sometimes use text a lot. I'm going to tell you this really great story. This doesn't really go anywhere, but the best experience I ever had in Second Life with my students was when we were actually walking around an educational space, trying to learn how to walk, and that's all I was trying to teach them. There was no content, not like how you started, there was no maths, there was no intention of teaching them anything other than the space. And all of a sudden, all of these angels and soldiers and drum people fell out of the sky, which often does happen in Second Life. So people go to these educational spaces that are open, and one of the things that's quite nice about Second Life is that often people will talk to you, so you can actually they're there, you can say, hi, can you tell us a bit about what you're doing and why you're here? And these people would not respond. We're asking them questions, and I'm saying, you know, the students thought this was really a great thing. But what actually happened was they didn't respond. I couldn't work out what was going on, but one of my students said, hey, look up. And I've been telling the students not to actually fly because I didn't want to lose them. When they fly away, and you can't talk to them and you can't text them, so they often can't find their way back. Does that make sense? So they get lost, and so you have to have something else as a backup. Like we had, you know, Skype, so they would go back to Skype and we tell them to come back and find out where we were. So I told them not to fly, and then everyone said, look up, and there's a jump jet above us, like a hovercraft, a hover plane, a plane which is sort of stationary in the sky. And often things that are actually made, like you can make objects in Second Life if you've got the, if you buy an island, you can make things. These guys are obviously making a game, and they made a jump jet, and they made costumes for themselves which look fantastic. And so that's all part of the process in Second Life, is making these things, and I think it's really good for game, sort of learning how to gameplay and so forth. And you don't really want to interact with people other than the people who are working through the game. I think that's a very cheap way to get a gameplay kind of feeling. Yeah. So Second Life does actually allow for that. But unfortunately, I went up, I flew up, and I said, look, if we want to, even though those people aren't talking to us, I reckon we could actually get into their plane just to see whether we can, you know, sit in the seat. And often when you point at something, if you get up close and you point at it, it'll allow you to get into it. And unfortunately, I didn't actually notice what was going on, so we all went up there, and I said, look, here's the seat. I'm going to see if I can sit in it, just to show you that this is one of the things that you can do in Second Life. And I didn't actually get to sit in it. I don't know what happened at this point, but down on the ground, the angels, this drunk character, and a few soldiers were setting up rocket launchers on the ground. So they'd even designed rocket launchers, and they were firing at the jump jet. So and obviously what happened then was the jump jet got hit. And all of my students, including me, were separated. So somehow it actually affected our position close to, and I ended up in the ocean. So I did exactly the wrong thing. I lost my whole class in one foul swoop, which is not to say but they all loved it. They loved the whole experience. They thought the activity for a design student would be fantastic. That was and it was far better than what I was attending, which was walking around and then showing them that you could have a lecture theatre with a set of slides. Do you follow what I'm saying here? It's completely wrong kind of space to do, you know, a big circle of people sitting down. It seems, and it's very hard to stop people doing things like flying, including you as a lecturer. It's so much easier to move around that space than it is to stand stationary and do things. But if you've got an activity like maybe a learning activity, do something, walk somewhere, go somewhere, do something, that's the way to use it, I think, as a learning space. It's for a design student, for an architecture student, those kind of things seem to make sense. But I'm wondering whether or not some of the things that we do, sort of philosophical discussions about education, whether they would make sense in a 3D space. Do people think that you could turn up to a lecture and learn more in a 3D space than you would?
I reckon looking how you're being assessed, like often in lectures, especially in undergrad, like it's all about getting as much information as you can and then being able to regurgitate that. Maybe it wouldn't be too ideal for that. It's more of like exploring and applying that knowledge taxonomy, evaluating things, which I think the next study does touch on.
Okay.
Maybe, because I sort of think, going back to Daniel said about the learning with the teamwork and the collaboration, it's really fantastic. It definitely should be something that we look to for high school students to be able to do, because my observations are that they really do struggle to be able to work together. But how much is a trade-off for actually teaching them content knowledge? Because if I see a health class, I'll see them once a week for 70 minutes over a term, and I've got to teach them a unit of whatever it is. So that's something like this I've seen a million times in uni, whether I don't get No question, I think you wouldn't get all the content that you need to teach your class, but they'd probably be able to explore some concepts in a lot more detail. Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense. Yeah. I think that's the point. I suppose the way this particular article you're referring to right now does break it up into three kinds of areas, doesn't it? So that you use the space as a communication space, which might encourage non-contributors to contribute because it's kind of more immersive, or it's less revealing of their personality. They can actually be a different person, or there's a freeing up of the communication. So if you're using it for that, or use it for a spatial, in a spatial way, like for designing a game or designing an architectural space. So it's a spatial learning thing that you're trying to cover. I'm not, but maybe there are other things like mathematical spatial kind of things. That I agree with you. You have to have a focus. What's the third thing that they said was there's three different. There's communication, spatial, and sort of object-oriented. Simulation, yeah. A simulation of an activity, like a filmmaking activity, or an actual space that you couldn't normally go to, like a historical space, a simulation, historical environment.
There's another game called about the movies, which is like a tycoon game, where you run a film studio, and maybe it's a tycoon game, but an aspect of the film game, if you get into that film.
Yep.
So you sort of choose characters and costumes and setting location, script the action, what they do, and that we also use that for sort of young groups as well. Very.
But I think that the point that these articles sort of allude to but don't quite specifically say is that there has to be a specific sort of activity, or much more focused than just going into the space to try and run a lecture. I think the running the lecture kind of method that Uni was attempting wasn't so great. It just felt wrong. It felt sort of artificial. Sort of sitting in one space listening to someone give a lecture seemed really weird to me. And that's all that I was going to demonstrate with the VEA, by the way. That's as far as we would get. You'd go and you'd see the notice board, you'd see that there was lectures on, and you might actually just turn up to an empty lecture. You'd see the space where the screen might be, and you might be able to download a PowerPoint presentation. Anyway, that's by the way. You keep him, sorry, Rob.
Good discussion. I probably learned more than anything else. In terms of the third study, okay, so looking at avatar and virtual environments and learning. Just trying to think back to the third. Oh, that's right. This was examining the sort of higher order thinking skills that we can elicit from students. So it looked at, I'm pretty sure, New Zealand school, and I think it mentioned methodology that I had a bit of a difficult time trying to get students to participate, but they still did get, I think, one top school did this the whole term, thereabouts. So it was quite a lot of students overall that I could probably draw upon. And using doing stats on me, they found that students are able to evaluate a lot of the information that's coming across. So I think this world involved, could be wrong, but this visual world, and I mentioned before how it was from software that was developed from funding from the NT government, like a sort of pollution type of world and the effects that their behaviour can have on polluting. So they're able to evaluate that if they polluted, I think if they were as water, the shell became big, or became too small or something like that. So they were starting to really be able to analyze the effects of pollution. And yeah, we pretty strongly that these virtual worlds are definitely able to establish higher order thinking skills in students as opposed to, I know a lot of the way that we tend to teach, unfortunately, which is all sort of content and then sort of regurgitated for us on a summative assessment, which isn't ideal, but I suppose it's the way that the BCE demands the students perform, so when we get them to fall in high school, which is a bit unfortunate. Anybody read that article and had a bit of a different perception of what I had? Because it was quite detailed, and I think overall probably the best reading that's there.
I had a slightly different impression of the investigative process. They may have actually gone out and done some investigations in their local area in New Zealand. I think it was very similar to the machine kind of process that the students were able to capture themselves presenting about that. So yes, they did actually, they may have been a little bit of investigation inside that world, but I think there was a lot of investigation in the real world as well as the Hamilton sort of city. And then the students actually gather their resources, might be exactly undermining what I just said earlier. The students then were able to, they were freed up in their communication ability to present to the city council about pollution, about making the city a great place and wonderful place to live, because they didn't feel uncomfortable about using an avatar. So that what they were trying to say was the avatar was, a way of presenting, a way of communicating that freed students up and gave students much more kind of articulate abilities than they would have had if they had to present to council by themselves without having the avatar as themselves. So that little graphic is actually one of the avatars for one of the students, and they put the school logo on the front, and they put, that's actually possibly a representation in a cartoon format of what the student may have actually looked like, or what she or he wanted to use as their avatar.
So they weren't actually investigating a virtual world.
I have a feeling that they won't. I have a feeling that the investigation may have been created in that world, and then the world would allow them to talk about their investigation, which may have actually been in the real world or in the city. Because they're talking mostly about the city.
Yeah.
And so am I right? Is that what I was trying to do? They didn't go into a lot of detail about why this was an effective space, but they were very positive about the contribution, higher order thinking and presentation skills, although they made the cautionary remark, yes, we do want students to be able to present directly, face to face to others, but to start them off, make them feel that they can do this. This was a way in. This was and the students actually said in their feedback, and you read some of the students' notes as you were reading that, that said, for those all as an avatar.
It's interesting too, because I remember when I did it as well, I think it was 2008, there was, we did, one of our SACs previous was a presentation, we needed to make it in clinical class, like a speech about a novel. So I think it could have changed. I'm pretty sure that everybody has to do a SAC, but they verbally gave a whole presentation. So I wonder if that's something that they possibly in future do, as opposed to that, where a lot of students who were really good with their English struggle to speak in front of people, but maybe it's a necessary skill to be able to speak in front of people too, so maybe use a word on that.
People agree that that might be useful for some students who feel a little bit nervous about presenting. Yeah, of course.
Especially with kids, I work in the school as a speak EAL, so it's English as second language. It's get up and speaking English from all these people, and they're speaking culture very different.
Yeah.
But having the uncomfortable, it's more, but they don't like to think about it.
Yeah.
It's staying on spot.
It could have been that there may be some investigation going on.
Yeah.
I
I was using that before I understand because I was reading all the higher thinking skills that I observed and they timed it at different times.
Yeah.
But like I couldn't get my head around what I was reading in terms of how, yeah, it made sense that they did it from speech. I thought it was just their communication and having with each other in the virtual world.
I think they also did that, but I'm not saying I totally understood. I'm just like you, I was a bit lost, but I felt that the avatar environment allowed either them to communicate with each other as they were investigating something, which wasn't in that space, but it was their method for communication. So they went to the space as a small group to design what they were going to talk about, and they worked in that space completely to design the whole thing. And then when they were ready, they put together a presentation where they spoke. But they spoke as an avatar to make a presentation to council or whoever interested in why it's a great city and why the pollution might be a problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, yeah, before I move on, because I do have an inquiry that I made. I don't know if it's going to be workable. Does anybody have a minute that they can log on to anyway? One? Also one. The people, yeah, so we've got at least 3 people who can do it, because if we can do it, we might be able to do this. And 3 people have any enough.
If it doesn't rain now,
Yeah.
we have to do this quickly.
Yeah, so pretty much, and again, if you don't want to do it and you want to stay here, that's fine. I just thought I'd come up with something a little bit fun to do before I hand back over. Real world problem. There's 3 pubs that are very close to here, not very far. I've got the Portland there, one that I've never been to, it's just across the road. I think it's just across the road. And then the Queensbridge, which is favourite, I think, of most education students. I don't know if it works. Pretty much what I wanted to try and do, not verbally communicating at all, pretending we are literally in the virtual world. We will try and go off in groups of 3. We don't even get excited using the name, is to go out and investigate who's got the cheapest pot of beer. And how we're going to do that is when you find out the price of each pot of beer at these 3 pubs, write it on the link so that we can all see. So when we get back to this room and we again talk to each other, we all know who it is that's got the cheapest beer. It might be a bit of a silly idea and have nothing to do with it. I think it's a bit silly, but I think it would be a fun way perhaps to actually get out of here and do something that's inquiry based while using the name to try and do it. And then it would work a lot better with 3 people at phones. Maybe 3 people at phones. Yeah, we could do it.
So the whole idea, I think, you have to keep in mind that although we're working in the real world to do this, you have to do it on the NIM, and this is very similar to trying to do an activity in a 3D virtual environment. You've got no other contact except through your computer device, and you may send people to different places to find things out. So you can do this in second, and there are multiple places to go. But organising it and actually making sure that things happen is kind of difficult, or maybe not. We'll find out.
So what I'll just say before I'll pretty much...
Big red, very
Yeah, I think Carlton Draft, they don't have that like that. So I might not just take whatever house they've got to this. But yeah, that's a... Yeah,
You're giving far too much information.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, I was going to say, that's a map of the 3 places. Maybe those 3 people that are happy to go out on their phones, we can identify them, now who they are, so we're not too hard. But then apart from that, all your communication about, say for instance, if Ollie's Ollie, if Ollie's got a phone, you guys have to work out which on the live chat who's going to go with Ollie. So like the 4 or 5 people from here that will go with him.
And then you have to, those people have to choose a part and tell others on the knee that's the part.
Okay.
Yes, you have to put in that. Before you leave, you have to say which pub you're going to, but who's going to go with you.
The only people you're allowed to verbally talk with are your group members once you leave the store. So before now and then, you can't verbally talk, that's cheating.
But the people online will
Yeah, go to the mic, chat. Kaufman.
I'm going to watch the link to see whether or not people are communicating, but we're only going to spend 15 minutes. If you don't find out within 15 minutes, you have to come back.
Yeah, exactly.
So, just at the moment, what's the time? We're not going to really get time to drink it, probably. All right, so we've got 4 people online. I bet you that people in this group online, what I've just asked them to do, if you're listening, everyone who's doing this online, you have to go to, you can work out a particular pub that's got a website. So that is, you have to do a search online for a pub with a website that has a beer price. You have to agree on the pub, and you have to do a bit of searching using Google perhaps to find a pub that has actually got a website with a beer price on it. It may not even be in Australia, but the idea is to use the NING as your method of communicating back to us about what's the name of the pub that you've agreed on and that you've gone to and had a look at their website, and what is the price of the standard beer. We're now actually not really worried about the type of beer, but what is the price of the standard beer, and we're going to follow you on the NING. Or you can do it in the chat area here if you like, that will be fine. You can actually you can talk to each other via the NING, which would be great, or you can talk to each other via the text chat here, or you can just turn your mics on and have a chat. Everyone's leaving the room at the moment, so it's not going to come up too late.
I just be rude. Sorry. Are we interrupting your conversation?
No. I hope you're going to work through the NING as well. I'm just going to see if the NING is actually going to work.
You kept saying that the restricted area and then like go ahead.
You can't go any further.
No.
In the back?
Yeah.
So you got further than me then.
I mean, it just kept saying restricted area and I don't know.
This is the link that I put up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just so I couldn't even more than that. So, yeah. Because I have to download the extension, which I did.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. That's enough.
Yeah.
That's good.
Anyone can waiting for this. So.
Yeah, that's the problem. There is no host. Yeah. Because the host can actually direct you around. Now, the funny thing is, I think I had to go on a computer that wasn't a university computer because you can't download. So you can't download on these. Yeah. So maybe if I can see whether or not I can use my